Go ahead.
Tony Ritrovato here for Retro Grammar. Yippee. I saw the other three videos for the first time. I hadn't seen them all before, and I noticed a couple things. A little bit too much repetition. I'm going to try to avoid that. The other thing is I was holding a book up in front of you. You couldn't see anything on the pages. Sorry about that. There were all kinds of mathematical formulas. There were diagrams that looked mathematical, and it was very confusing. So I'll try to avoid that best I can. I'm not a movie star or anything. Which brings up something else. I'm not an intellectual either. I spell terrible, or terribly, if you wish. I do whatever you want with that. I don't read that much unless something interests me. As far as saying, oh, I want to have a good book, no. I have no PhDs behind my name. I never even published anything. So what are my credentials? My credentials are standing here. I have two 15-year-olds who can do more with grammar now than I could do as a teacher. I'm talking a college graduate and probably 5 years down the road as a teacher. They know more about it right now than I did. Any grammarian who tested them and checked out their expertise at this would be amazed. What are my credentials? My credentials are, when I had a sabbatical, I had a bunch of kids, maybe 15, that had been in my classes. And they came to me after I was out of school. There was no grade involved in this. And they dealt with my grammar. We just worked my grammar. When did they come? During their lunch period. They wolfed down their lunch and they went into this broom closet and we talked grammar for the rest of the year. I'd like to put those credentials up against any of you PhDs. I'd like to know. Could you do that? I have something great here. It occurs to me that I build foundations. I can't make this simple. I can't make English grammar simple. I can't make it not abstract. There are foundations that I'm going to lay, and I'm going to expect you to remember that stuff, and I'm going to keep building on it. The adults out there, no problem. The kids are going to have trouble. But you have the tapes, and maybe take some notes. I have these 100 questions that I periodically go through my students just to see if they remember all the terminology, because you have to have some basis for communication. As I say, I can't make this simple. English grammar is amazing. You know, it's a system. And the system, on the one hand, is very rigid. If you violate it, first you're going to end up with ambiguous communication, then you're going to end up with no communication at all. So the system is pretty rigid, but the system is arbitrary. It's not an exact science. It just kind of fell together. So what you have is a system that doesn't follow its own rules, which is really weird, but that's the way it is. For instance, there's something called, I'm going to have to use the word verb here because you haven't been exposed to my program yet. And you will, believe me, I'll get to it. But the irregular verb, there's something called an irregular verb, which means you have all these infinitive forms. I'm sorry about the word infinitive for those of you kids. I'll get to this stuff. But an infinitive would be a word like walk, or a word like paint, or a word like show. And most infinitive forms get turned into, not most, a lot of infinitive forms get turned into past forms by putting an ed back there. Walked, painted, showed. But there are others that don't. They're called irregular verbs. Now here you have a very systematic approach to make it something past time. And the language turns around and violates its own rules. It says, past form of go is went. They're the same word. They are. Go, G-O, went, W-E-N-T, same word. Ridiculous. But it's part of our system. So you have these little kids who don't know the system and they say, I goed with my mommy to the store, and you say, oh, you nice little kid, you poor guy, you just don't know. They don't know. They're too logical to know. If I was king of the world, there wouldn't be any irregular verbs. Go would be goed. Sing would be singed. Dive would be, well, maybe it is dived, as well as dove. There's one of those alternate things. But I'm not, and I'll never be, and it's okay. These things are fine. But you have to understand, the English language is replete with all these contradictions. You have this wonderful system that you can't violate, but it violates its own rules. So we have to deal with that, and I can't make it easy. but I can explain it in ways that you'll understand it. My credentials. I'm the village idiot, but the village idiot has figured something out. And if the village idiot can do it, anybody can do it. They're my credentials. All right, let me get into this. Now, it's time to get into this thing. I've been talking about it for weeks. The way language is taught in the classroom, the first thing little kids learn, don't ask me how old, I don't know, but the first thing little kids learn in terms of studying English, studying language, is the alphabet. And they learn it, I remember learning it. It's cool when you know these things. Once they learn the alphabet, then they are taught to take the alphabet and they form words. I remember the flashcards teacher. I remember the first word I ever read, it was church. First grade, when is that? First, second grade, kindergarten? Church. I remember it was like a bulb going off in my head. Church! I can read, yay! My little grandson just went through the same insight, and he said to me last time I saw him, Grandpa, I can read, and he's sounding out the words. It's really cool, it's great. As soon as the kid learns to sound out words, then we get to the infamous 8 parts of speech and to the concept of the sentence. We go from letters, which they learn, to words, which they learn, to categorizing words, which is, who cares, to the sentence. That doesn't work, ladies and gentlemen. That doesn't work, all you English profs. You need to go, there are 2 steps there that have to be mastered before you ever get to the sentence. How is a sentence defined? Group of words has a subject and a predicate, expresses a complete thought. It's not a sentence. No, it isn't. A sentence can have 50 subject and predicates in them, and they can all express all kinds of thoughts. A sentence, well, what you're doing is you're defining something called a clause. So here's what you have to do. You want to be a good English teacher? You start with the alphabet. No problem. Kids love it. Teach them their words. Don't even mention the sentence. Teach them to form words into bigger constructions called phrases. When's the first time the word phrase is introduced in an English class? 4th grade, 5th grade? You can't do it that way. It doesn't work. You build from letters to words to phrases, and then from phrases to clauses. Only when a kid has mastered the clause do you try to explain to him when a clause is a sentence. Yes, it is. It can be. And when a clause that used to be a sentence is not a sentence any longer. And should I stop there? I mean, I don't want to go over it. I think we're going to stop there. And next time out, I'm going to talk about the phrase and what a phrase is. I'm also going to talk about the 4 jobs that words do and what we should be trying to do in the English classroom. Tony Richard Vada signing off. Take care.